I'm expecting you all to be quiet and attentive tonight. Now, I have to say that as I look down and I see the surviving members of Sherbet, and I see Bob King, and I see Ray Burgess, I have to rub my eyes and wonder whether I'm actually at a taping of Flashes or Countdown. But then again, as I look to the room in general, I think that this is like kind of like a rock and roll gallery of, well, there are people here. I just did a bit of scribbling while I was sitting there. We have members of Carver's Jute, the Go-Betweens, the Masters Apprentices, the Throb, Ray Brown and the Whispers, Air Supply, the Atlantics and the Angels, and of course Dinah Lee and Little Patty. I mean, it would have been worth the price of admission alone to be able to come here and see all these legendary folk. It seems to me that the prerequisite for the honour I'm about to bestow is that the recipient has to have somehow woven a thread into the national fabric, has to have crafted a song or many songs which have become part of us, which have endured for decades and found an audience well beyond the initial one. This has certainly been the case with the writers who have been previously honoured here by my good self, with Wright Vander Young, Ross Wilson, Richard Clapton, Shorrock Goebel, Birtles, Brian Cadd, Brewster Neeson Brewster, Don Walker and Steve Kilby. And it's certainly the case with the man whose career I am about to celebrate. The first thing I might establish is that, like a number of creative forces not generally recognised as such, Reg Mombassa Keith Urban, he is a Kiwi, born in the town of Hamilton. He is credited a childhood in rural New Zealand for giving him an inherent sense of country values, which would come in useful later on. Like so many Kiwi rock hopefuls in the 60s, Garth Porter, who had played in outfits called the Swells Foot Assembly and the District Hats, headed across the Tasman, finding himself in some demand on the Sydney band scene as a talented keyboard player would be. One of them was a bluesy outfit called Toby Jug, and I think it was from there and from those ranks that he came on board Sherbet, an exceptionally appealing pop rock band that had released its first single in 1969, him replacing Sam C. That was at about the time that vocalist Darryl Braithwaite had come on board from the progressive band Samael Lilith and Tony Mitchell from Wheelbarrow. An entirely new Sherbet was coming together, and the group that would come to be a part of our lives did not have a single member from the original formation, the powerhouse drummer Alan Sandow being the one who went furthest back. Now, Roger Davies, a 20-year-old Monash University economics dropout, was writing for the Daily Planet hippie rag and lugging gear for Company Cane when he accepted a friend's advice to check out a band at Sydney's Jonathan's Disco, playing from 8 p.m. till 3 a.m. 4 nights a week for the grand sum of $260. What he saw in the dank, dark, dull and indulgent musical year of 1972 was a band that actually appeared to be enjoying themselves by communicating with their audience. Later he agreed to become their manager. That year, Sherbet won the final Holy's National Battle of the Sounds and charted 2 top 20 singles, following on from 2 the previous year. Now, under Roger's management, and keep in mind that this is the man who would go on to manage Tina Turner, Olivia Newton-John, Joe Cocker, Mick Jagger, Janet Jackson, Sade, Cher and Pink, amongst others, Sherbet grew in rapid stature. They had captured national attention back when they had toured with Creedence Clearwater Revival. Audiences liked what they saw, always. Initially, the songs they came to us with were covers from Badfinger, Blue Mink, Delaney and Bonnie, Ted Mulry, and even Elvis Presley. But by late 1972, with the brooding, stark and compelling You've Got the Gun, and 1973, with a sumptuous and exquisite piece of pop that Garth penned with guitarist Clive Shakespeare after dreaming about a Greek goddess, Cassandra opened a door for Sherbet, as well as giving us one of our greatest pieces of pop and one of my favourite songs of all time. Now, from 1975, I was in a unique position to observe Sherbet up close. I had created and was managing a loony outfit called Old 55, who debuted with a triple platinum album that knocked ABBA off #1. We found ourselves on many shows together, and the memories are rich. I just dug up a feature story I'd written for Penthouse magazine when it was all over, and I'll ask you to indulge me as I read from it, just to give you a sense of place, and in Sherbet's case, power. I open the story with, in May 1976, I found myself walking down the centre aisle of Brisbane's grimy festival hall. The intermission lights were dimming and scattered chatter was moulding itself into a cacophony of high-pitched squeals and titters. New teen sensations, Old 55 and TMG, had carried off the first half admirably, fueling the mounting frenzy. Streamers and trash were ankle deep over the stage, and most of the front row seats were already sodden with the excretions of excitement. Under cover of darkness, 5,000 young females had poised and primed themselves for the marathon to come. And as a ragged roadie with matted chest hair screamed out his introduction, they rose in perfect unison, roaring like the backwash of a 747. As Sherbet hit the stage, they hit the seats. Craning tiptoe for a view through waving arms and banners, streamers and giant signs held aloft, proclaiming undying dedication and decidedly lustful proposals. They'd been begged and implored not to stand on the seats, but within seconds they were up and nothing but fire hoses could have shifted them. Having never been caught in a bushfire or civil insurrection, I had no way of bracing myself against the awesome energy which physically shook and frightened me for the few minutes I stood my ground. And imaginary it was not. For what seems like days, I was buoyed by the power charge, uncommonly alert and needing little sleep. I went on in the story to talk about, I'm not sure whether it was this venue, it could have been Sydney or it could have been Melbourne, they all merge into one, but I talked about making my escape along with the band in an armoured car, and I said one measured stride landed each of them in the armoured vehicle, followed by members of the support acts. I scrambled in last, barely avoiding amputation as the van lurched forward and the steel doors slammed shut behind me. As we inched forward, a series of dull, reverberating thuds became apparent on the walls. I presumed it to be 1,000 dumpy fists, but the others knew better. "It's kamikaze time again," quipped a voice down near the driver, and as if on cue, a young girl crashed onto the windscreen, flattening her distraught face against the glass. Two other young girls followed her lead, clutching tight to windscreen wipers or the lip of the cabin roof guttering. As the truck halted, the occupants, myself excluded, were not so much worried as angered by the failure to effect a successful escape. Outside, I learned later, a girl had thrown herself before the wheels of the truck, screaming, run me over, I'll die for Sherbet." A few minutes later, it seemed as if I would be serving such a sacrificial role, as the body of the van began to lurch from side to side. The little buggers were trying to overturn the multi-tonned vehicle. Now, Sherbet never really operated as a rock band. They reigned. The young satin-clad princes were far more than musicians. They were possibly, at ad agency's perspective of youth. Canny politicians sought their company. Editors splashed their squabbles over the front pages of metropolitan dailies. And Molly Meldrum treated them with almost as much choking respect as he did Prince Charles. As an enterprise, they were the BHP of rock. Totally self-contained. They ran their own tours, owned their own publishing rights, had their own record label, operated their own fan club, controlled their own product merchandising, and essentially determined their own destiny. Singles appeared like clockwork every 3 months, each a subtle progression from the other. A blockbusting new album was released each year, augmented by regular greatest hits and live concert packages. Sherbet defied the rule, the time-honoured dictum which allows a maximum of 3 years of frenzied teen idolatry to any one entity. Such longevity, a decade plus in fact, would be impressive for a nondescript Australian boogie band. For a high-profile outfit at the mercy of fickle kids, it stands as nothing less than miraculous. Their run was phenomenal. 20 consecutive hit singles, plus 5 for Darryl, who joins us over here tonight. 12 albums yielding 10 platinum and 8 gold discs, every possible Australian music award of the 70s, and the honour of being not only the biggest domestic record sellers of all time at the time, but the first act to sell $1 million worth of records in this wide brown land. No Sherbet event ever simply happened. It was planned, touted, televised, recorded, publicised and endorsed. When the How's That album was launched in mid-76, Kim Rann, daughter of the New South Wales Premier, was fetched along to add a little media spice. A year later, at the launch of the Photoplay album, they got the Premier himself, with the Lord Mayor of Sydney added for dessert. Sherbet were the first Australian band to realise the potential worth of taking their music to the people, all the people, on long national tours. Lugging 7 tonnes of equipment worth then $100,000 plus, they would set out in Greyhound coaches for up to 3 months, poking their noses into dark corners of the continent, which had not seen a rock band since the Easy Beats in 1965. Their concerts were intense and exciting spectacles, visual replicas of their countdown image. All the tricks were dragged out of the hat: flashy lighting, smoke bombs, tantalising stage stunts, cheeky dialogue. To city kids, many of the trappings had become passé, but to rural fans, it was like 3 Christmases coming at once. Sherbet undertook about 20 gruelling national tours, at least half of which were carefully timed and named to coincide with an album release. Tour album operations were exactingly planned up to a year in advance, often structured to allow free nights to collect awards they had no doubt would be forthcoming. Musically, the outfit was a great deal more proficient than their image may have suggested. Their live sound was full-bodied and imaginative, iced with enough razzle-dazzle to make them seem slightly, not slightly, hugely larger than life. A succinct sense of entertainment prevailed on stage, curbing excess and fostering a warmth between act and audience, which extended to the swapping of football scores between songs. Now, what gave the band its sheen, its gloss, the ability to crack the UK and European top 3, as well as the American charts, was the rich vein of song that flowed. First from Garth and Clive, and after his departure, Garth and bassist Tony Mitchell, who also joins us tonight. A Sherbet song was a masterful song, one that radio could rely upon. Slipstream, Life, Rock Me Gently, Magazine Madonna, Another Night on the Road, Child's Play, Only One You, Silvery Moon, Feels Like It's Slipping Away, the glistening and gorgeous Summer Love, and of course, the timeless How's That. With Sherbet, the process was always songwriting, Garth said recently in one of his few interviews. I was the member of the band who was most responsible for getting the recordings together. Essentially, my responsibility was that the songs were organised, that we maintained the integrity of the songs. It just turned out that way. I guess I had the desire to want to do that. After Sherbet was finally laid to rest in 1984, after some strong Sherbs recordings that went criminally unrecognised, one that included Crazy in the Night, recorded by Tina Turner, Garth was momentarily in a quandary. Country music wasn't even in the realm of thoughts, he told Debbie Kruger in another interview. A solo performing career was a vague option, but never pursued. I'm a shocker of a singer. Can I say I beg to differ. I mean, he was the lead on a few Sherbet tracks, including the hit Matter of Time, which sounded quite all right to me, and no doubt to you as well. He was in some ways, by this time, burned out. The Sherbet thing was just going so fast all the time, he said, and we'd stop and have 6 weeks to write a new album. So I just shut myself off and clutched at straws, whatever I could, to piece together the ingredients for an album, he would later explain. And as soon as that was finished, we were on the road again. There was really no time to think about yourself or put yourself in any position to recharge the batteries to get re-enthused about anything. At his publishing company, Rondor Music, he ran into songwriter Rhys Kirk, who'd cracked it for a major Crystal Gale hit in the US. We sort of had things in common, Garth explained. And he was writing country music, and I hadn't really thought about it at the time. So we got together on fairly regular occasions and started writing songs together. And invariably, they turned out to be country songs. I like the disciplines of country music. You write a good song and it's got to be sound from top to bottom. You can't use studio tricks to make it work. When their songs went out to artists, those artists wanted Garth to produce. And hey, he wasn't doing a lot else. Around this time, he had come to a conclusion. As he would later say, I thought about the important things, about what being an Australian means to me, and I discovered the wonderful poetry of Henry Lawson in particular, and I just melted. I realised that this was the core of what the lyrical content should be. Really potent, brilliantly written, emotional, romantic. Because I'd come through the contemporary music scene, I thought, we can really inject some energy, some attitude, some modern recording values into this. The Australian country music tradition has a very rich heritage and should be acknowledged and embraced by anybody going into country music. I don't think that you can walk in there without recognising what it's been in order to become a traveller on its roads. You've got to know where that road has come from to give you some bearing of where you're headed to. And it seems to me that it was a very simple thing to embrace the lyrical tradition and even to an extent the musical tradition, but to do it so that it sounded like it was done this year instead of something that was recycled from 20 or 30 years ago. With a head full of these thoughts, he connected with Lee Kernaghan, the son of country veteran Ray Kernaghan, who had won the Star Maker Quest in 1982, but had not done a great deal after that. Lee sang some of Garth's demos and a bond was formed, though not until Garth had stripped him gently of his Americanisms. He says, I thought this is not relevant to here. How can I expect this to move people or for people to take it into their hearts when it doesn't even sound like it's written for them in a way that Australian people understand and live their lives? He said, Lee, I really think you need to get in touch with your heritage as an Australian. I would suggest you delve back into the works of Henry Lawson and Banjo Patterson and have a look at yourself and where you come from, how you grew up. And the idea for Boys in the Bush came from that. It was a real turning point for me with my songwriting and in my thinking. Now, as Debbie Kruger has written, that Porter Kernaghan song has become the new anthem for country music. It might not have sold as many copies as A Pub With No Beer, but it was more relevant to the 1990s, celebrating the modern Australian rural spirit. If it wasn't for Garth, there would be no Boys from the Bush, says guitarist Rob McCormack, who has played on every Porter-produced album. Lee would probably still be singing Hank Williams Jr. songs in Australia trying to make that work. One day, when Lee had sorted out his real estate diploma, which seemed important to him at the time, let's actually talk about that, Garth said, hey Lee, we've got a bit of space. Do you want to get together and write some songs? Fateful bloody words. And so the floodgates opened for Garth Porter as both a country music producer and songwriter, though it is the latter that primarily concerns us here. He became a kingpin in that genre with a few shelffuls of awards and a formidable reputation as a consummate professional who could be relied upon to deliver the goods in every situation. Not only did he mould and shape the musical career of Lee, who is also here tonight, including co-writing songs with him for the Man from Snowy River Arena Spectacular, which would lead to the Australian Outback Spectacular on the Gold Coast. He also gave a firm creative focus and direction to James Blundell. Since then, he's worked with Travis Sinclair, Gina Jeffries, Marcus Meyer, Troy Cassadaly, Anna Christensen, Tanya Kernaghan, and many others. For Sarah Storer and John Williamson, he penned Raining on the Plains. Then there were successful commercials for Coke and Cologne. Then his production credits include an internationally successful Craig McLachlan hidden album and the particularly fine Leo Sayer album of recent years, Don't Wait Until Tomorrow. With Lee Kernaghan's albums, the lyrics are in many ways the foundation of the project, the tone of the proceedings. Garth has described his writing style as the Australian story, explaining, I try to get as honest and as authentic as I can. I do spend a lot of time writing ahead of these albums. There's always a lot of late night bottles of red wine at home by myself. That's usually when I write the lyrics. I'm not much good at lyric writing when I'm in a room with people. I get the idea, then take it home and write the lyric totally alone. There are, of course, some notable collaborators. Colin Buchanan, also sitting here, certainly standing out. As the man who said, I think it would be horrid to wake up one day and not be able to write, Garth Porter is in the upper echelon of that craft which many of you here tonight seek to master. Indeed, he had a message for you, you might say, for you all when he said in an interview,
I think you've just got to keep at it and keep at it and keep at it. I'm such an obsessive person, totally obsessed by all aspects of music, songwriting, recording technology. It's fascinating, every aspect of it. I suppose over the years you kind of take for granted how much you know about so many fine details of different parts of the musical process, playing, writing, recording, technology, all of that. And let me say, you also stockpile some songs. His APRA registration file lists well over 800 of them, which gets him up into the Vanda and Young League. Try to imagine modern Australian country music without the Outback Club, Three Chain Road, Hat Down, they don't make them like that anymore, and of course Boys from the Bush. And then there's his sole writing effort, Save the Lamb, which Lee recorded with American country star Trisha Yearwood. Perhaps slightly more memorable than the James Last orchestra version of How's That, which I'm assured by Mary did not make him large amounts of money. No, never mind. As a young man, he once concluded, music consists of high notes, low notes and medium notes. Well, he's known them all, he's played and written them all.